Have you ever stared at your phone waiting for a message that never came? Have you ever replayed conversations in your mind, wondering what you did wrong, why someone suddenly became distant, or why the effort you poured into a relationship was met with silence? That silence hurts more than rejection because it leaves you trapped inside unanswered questions. Every time you chase someone who repeatedly ignores you, something invisible slips away from you. It is not your money. It is not your time alone. It is something far more valuable, your power. Most people never notice the exact moment it happens because power is not something you can hold in your hands. It is reflected in how you carry yourself, how others perceive you, and how deeply you value your own existence. Think carefully about the people who command respect wherever they go. They are not the loudest. They are not the ones constantly seeking approval. They are not endlessly explaining themselves or convincing others to stay. Their strength comes from a quiet certainty. They know their worth without needing someone else to confirm it. Now compare that image with the person who constantly reaches out after receiving silence. One unanswered message becomes two. Two become five. Excuses replace reality. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they forgot. Maybe if I show them how much I care, they'll appreciate me. But beneath every excuse lies one painful truth. You have begun negotiating for attention that should have been given freely. Human beings are deeply influenced by what they observe, not by what they are told. You may tell someone you respect yourself, but your actions reveal something entirely different if you continue chasing those who continually dismiss you. Every unnecessary pursuit sends an unspoken message. I believe your attention is more valuable than my dignity. And people believe the message you communicate through your behavior far more than the words you speak. This is one of the harshest realities of human psychology. The more you demonstrate that someone occupies the center of your emotional world while you barely exist in theirs, the greater the imbalance becomes. Relationships are built on mutual investment, not emotional begging. The moment one person starts carrying the entire weight, the relationship stops being a partnership and becomes a pursuit. The tragedy is that most people mistake persistence for loyalty. They believe that refusing to give up proves the depth of their character, but persistence is only admirable when directed toward worthy goals. Persisting in chasing someone who repeatedly shows indifference is not loyalty, it is self-abandonment. Imagine carrying a bucket of water to a tree that has already died. Every day you return with hope. Every day you pour more water. Every day you convince yourself that tomorrow the leaves will return. But no matter how much effort you invest, the tree remains lifeless because the problem was never your commitment. The problem was that you were feeding something that could no longer grow. People often do the same with relationships. Instead of accepting clear evidence, they invest even more energy. They become more available, more forgiving, more understanding, more patient. They sacrifice their schedules, their peace of mind, even their identity, believing that one final act of devotion will awaken appreciation. It rarely does, because attention given without boundaries gradually loses its value. What is constantly available is easily taken for granted. When someone discovers that they can ignore you today and still have your full attention tomorrow, they unconsciously learn that your presence requires no effort to maintain. This is why chasing slowly changes your position without you realizing it. You begin as an equal, but every unanswered call, every one-sided conversation, every attempt to force connection moves you lower while placing the other person higher. Eventually, they are no longer deciding whether to value you. They are deciding how little effort they can give while still keeping you around. The most dangerous part is that this process rarely happens overnight. It happens gradually, through hundreds of small compromises. You ignore disrespect because you fear losing them. You tolerate inconsistency because you remember who they used to be. You lower your expectations because asking for basic respect suddenly feels like asking for too much. Little by little, you stop protecting your own standards. You begin measuring your happiness by someone else's responses. A single text can determine your mood. A delayed reply can ruin your day. Their approval becomes your emotional currency, and without realizing it, you have handed someone else complete control over your inner peace. This is how power disappears. Not through one dramatic event, but through repeated moments where you choose their comfort over your dignity. The irony is that the more desperately you seek someone's attention, the less attractive your presence often becomes. Confidence attracts because it communicates abundance. Desperation repels because it communicates scarcity. When your life revolves around earning one person's validation, you unintentionally reveal that your happiness depends on someone who has already shown they are unwilling to provide it. Real confidence is not found in convincing people to stay. It is found in knowing that your value remains unchanged whether they stay or leave. The strongest people understand that attention is not something to beg for. Respect is not something to negotiate. Love is not something to chase. These things either flow naturally through mutual effort, or they slowly become prisons disguised as relationships. Every moment spent pursuing someone who ignores you is a moment not invested in your own growth, your purpose, your discipline, your future, or the people who genuinely appreciate your presence. The greatest cost is not rejection itself. The greatest cost is becoming so consumed by one person's indifference that you forget the extraordinary life waiting beyond their silence. There is a difficult truth about human nature that many people spend years trying to avoid. People do not always value those who value them the most. In fact, when your entire emotional world revolves around gaining someone's approval, you often become less significant in their eyes. It sounds unfair, even cruel, but life has never promised that effort alone creates appreciation. Human psychology operates according to deeper forces than emotion. It responds to confidence, scarcity, and self-respect far more than desperation, availability, or constant reassurance. Most people believe that if they care enough, love enough, sacrifice enough, or remain patient enough, they will eventually earn someone's attention. They think affection is a transaction. If I give enough, surely they'll give something back. But relationships are not business contracts. They are emotional exchanges, and when one person keeps giving while expecting the other to eventually change, the balance quietly collapses. Imagine entering a room where one person constantly seeks everyone's approval. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny. They agree with opinions they secretly dislike. They constantly ask, "Are you okay with me?" They apologize even when they have done nothing wrong. At first, people may find them pleasant, but over time, something changes. Respect begins to fade because they have revealed that their identity depends entirely on external acceptance. Now imagine another person in that same room. They are calm. They listen more than they speak. They are kind without being needy. They do not force conversations. They are comfortable with silence. They neither chase admiration nor fear rejection. Their confidence is quiet, not loud. Strangely enough, people become curious about them. Why? Because confidence creates mystery, while desperation removes it. Human beings naturally become interested in what appears complete without them. This is why seeking validation is one of the fastest ways to lose it. Validation is a dangerous addiction because it convinces you that your value exists somewhere outside yourself. You begin measuring your worth by responses, compliments, likes, invitations, and attention. A delayed reply suddenly feels like rejection. A short conversation feels like failure. Someone else's mood becomes responsible for your own emotional stability. The moment this happens, you have unknowingly surrendered control of your happiness. The person you chase may not even realize the power they hold over you. They don't need to manipulate you because your need for their approval does all the work. Every decision you make begins revolving around one question. Will this make them like me more? That question becomes a prison. Instead of asking what aligns with your principles, your purpose, or your future, you begin asking what will prevent someone from leaving. You stop expressing disagreement because conflict might push them away. You ignore disrespect because confrontation feels risky. You silence your own needs because pleasing them becomes more important than protecting yourself. Little by little, your personality disappears. Ironically, the very qualities that once made you attractive, your confidence, independence, opinions, ambition, and individuality, are sacrificed in an attempt to keep someone interested. You become a version of yourself designed entirely for someone else's approval. And people notice. Not consciously, perhaps, but instinctively, confidence communicates abundance. It says, "My life has purpose beyond your opinion." Neediness communicates scarcity. It says, "My happiness depends on what you think of me." Scarcity has always influenced human perception. Consider anything people value in life. Rare opportunities attract attention. Limited resources become desirable. Time itself becomes valuable because it cannot be replaced. Yet when it comes to relationships, many people completely ignore this principle. They make themselves endlessly available, believing constant presence guarantees appreciation. Instead, constant availability often produces the opposite effect. When someone learns they can cancel plans repeatedly, ignore messages, offer minimal effort, and still receive unlimited patience, they slowly stop recognizing the privilege of your presence. Not because they are evil, but because human beings naturally adapt to whatever becomes predictable. The extraordinary becomes ordinary through constant exposure. This is why people who endlessly chase validation unintentionally teach others to underestimate them. Every extra effort beyond what is reciprocated lowers the perceived value of that effort. Every sacrifice made without boundaries quietly announces that your standards can be negotiated. Many people believe they are demonstrating unconditional love when, in reality, they are demonstrating unconditional tolerance. There is an enormous difference. Love without respect eventually becomes emotional dependence. Respect without boundaries eventually becomes submission. The strongest relationships are built between two people who choose each other freely, not because one fears losing the other, but because both recognize each other's value. There is another uncomfortable reality. Some people ignore you not because you lack worth, but because they have become accustomed to your pursuit. They know you will text first. They know you will apologize first. They know you will return even after being ignored. They know your forgiveness has no limits. Why would they feel urgency when they have never experienced your absence? People rarely appreciate what they believe they can never lose. This does not mean you should manipulate others by pretending to leave. Authentic strength is not a strategy to force someone's attention. Authentic strength comes from genuinely realizing that your life cannot revolve around convincing someone to recognize what they have consistently refused to see. The moment you stop asking, "How can I make them value me?" your entire perspective changes. Instead, you begin asking better questions. Am I valuing myself? Am I investing my energy wisely? Am I becoming someone I can respect? Because the people who command genuine admiration are rarely those who spend their lives chasing recognition. They are the ones whose confidence is built from within, whose standards remain intact even when others walk away, and whose sense of identity is too strong to be determined by someone else's willingness to pay attention. One of the greatest demonstrations of strength is not winning an argument, proving someone wrong, or forcing people to understand your value. It is learning how to walk away without anger. Most people misunderstand what it means to leave. They believe walking away is an act of revenge, pride, or bitterness. They imagine slamming doors, delivering dramatic speeches, or making sure the other person regrets losing them. But true strength has never needed an audience. The strongest departure is often the quietest one. When someone repeatedly ignores you, your first instinct is usually emotional. You want answers, you want explanations, you want closure, you want to know why your effort was not enough. Your mind begins searching for reasons because uncertainty feels unbearable. It convinces you that if you can simply understand what happened, the pain will disappear. But life rarely offers perfect explanations. Sometimes people lose interest. Sometimes their priorities change. Sometimes they simply do not value what you offered. And sometimes their silence is already the answer you keep refusing to accept. The mistake many people make is believing they are owed a satisfying conclusion. They wait for the perfect apology, the perfect explanation, or the perfect conversation before giving themselves permission to move on. Days become weeks, weeks become months. Their life remains emotionally tied to someone who has already continued living theirs. This is how emotional prisons are built. Not through locked doors, but through unanswered questions. There is a profound difference between seeking understanding and seeking permission to let go. When your peace depends on another person's explanation, they continue controlling your emotional state long after they have left your life. Every day you wait for closure is another day your future remains connected to someone else's decision. Real closure is not something another person gives you. It is something you decide. Walking away without anger begins the moment you accept that not every chapter ends with justice. Some people will never recognize your loyalty. Some will never apologize for the pain they caused. Some will replace you without hesitation. Others will forget promises they once made with complete sincerity. You cannot control any of that. What you can control is whether you allow their choices to define the rest of your life. Anger often disguises itself as strength, but in reality, it keeps you emotionally attached to the very people you claim to have left behind. When you constantly replay arguments in your mind, imagine revenge, or hope someone eventually suffers the way you did, you remain connected to them. They continue occupying space inside your thoughts without even knowing it. The opposite of love is not hatred. The opposite of love is emotional freedom. Freedom begins when their presence no longer determines your peace. Many people think silence is weakness because our culture encourages constant explanation. We are taught to defend ourselves, justify our actions, and make sure everyone understands our perspective. But not everyone deserves access to your explanations. Sometimes silence communicates more than 1,000 carefully chosen words. Silence says, "I no longer need to convince you." Silence says, "My peace matters more than winning this conversation." Silence says, "I accept reality even when it disappoints me." This kind of silence is not passive aggression. It is disciplined self-control. There is enormous power in refusing to chase the final word. The person who always needs the last message, the last argument, or the last explanation often reveals that they are still emotionally dependent on the outcome. The person who quietly moves forward demonstrates something far greater, inner certainty. Walking away also requires separating your identity from rejection. This is where many people struggle. They interpret someone's indifference as evidence that something must be wrong with them. If they ignored me, maybe I'm not interesting enough. If they left, maybe I'm not lovable. If they chose someone else, maybe I wasn't enough. These thoughts slowly become beliefs. But another person's decision is not a measurement of your value. A diamond remains valuable even when someone fails to recognize it. A masterpiece does not lose its worth because one person walks past it without looking. Value exists independently of recognition. People reject opportunities every day that would have changed their lives. They ignore friendships that could have lasted decades. They abandon relationships that later become their greatest regret. Human judgment is imperfect. Do not build your identity on someone else's inability to appreciate you. Walking away peacefully also means refusing to carry resentment into your future. Resentment is heavy. It consumes emotional energy that could be invested in growth. It keeps old wounds alive long after they should have healed. Every bitter memory becomes another chain connecting you to the past. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Forgiveness does not mean pretending nothing happened. It does not mean inviting toxic people back into your life. It does not mean forgetting the lessons they taught you. Forgiveness simply means refusing to carry the poison they left behind, because bitterness punishes the person holding it far more than the person who caused it. Imagine carrying a heavy stone every single day because someone offended you years ago. At first, you hardly notice the weight, but over time, your shoulders ache, your pace slows, your energy disappears. The person who handed you the stone may have forgotten it entirely, yet you continue carrying it everywhere. Eventually, you realize something important. You were always free to put it down. Walking away without anger is not about proving that you no longer care. It is about proving that your future matters more than your past. It is choosing discipline over drama, peace over pride, growth over revenge. The greatest victories are often invisible. They happen when you stop checking whether someone noticed your absence, when you stop wondering if they regret their decision, when you stop imagining conversations that will never happen. When your mornings begin without thoughts of the people who once consumed your nights, that is the moment you reclaim your life. Because the highest form of power is not making someone miss you, it is reaching a point where whether they miss you or not no longer changes the direction of your life. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must make a choice. They can continue investing their energy into people who repeatedly overlook them, or they can invest that same energy into becoming someone whose presence carries undeniable value. Most people spend years trying to become impossible to leave. The wiser path is to become impossible to replace. There is a profound difference between these two pursuits. The first is driven by fear. The second is driven by purpose. Fear whispers, how can I make them stay? Purpose asks, how can I become the best version of myself regardless of who stays? That single shift changes everything. Too many people waste their greatest years trying to solve someone else's indifference. They replay conversations, search for hidden meanings, rewrite messages, and imagine different outcomes. Their minds become consumed by a battle they cannot win because they are trying to change another person's perception while neglecting the one perception they actually control, their own. Imagine planting two identical seeds. One spends all its energy wondering why the sun shines more brightly on another plant. It compares itself every day. It envies the attention others receive. It complains about what it lacks. The other simply grows day after day, quietly, patiently, without asking for permission. Months later, one remains trapped in comparison while the other has become a towering tree. Growth has always been the greatest answer to rejection. When people ignore you, your first instinct is often to look outward. You ask what they are thinking, what they are feeling, or why they changed, but your greatest opportunities are never found by staring outward. They are discovered by looking inward. Ask yourself different questions. What skill could I master? What habit could I strengthen? What discipline have I been avoiding? What version of myself have I postponed becoming because I was too distracted seeking approval? Every hour spent chasing someone who ignores you is an hour that could have been invested in building a future that no one can take away. Knowledge cannot be stolen. Character cannot be borrowed. Discipline cannot be faked. Purpose cannot be given by another person. These are the investments that continue paying dividends long after temporary relationships have faded. History repeatedly shows that the individuals who leave the deepest mark on the world were rarely obsessed with convincing everyone to like them. They became consumed by mastery. They developed uncommon abilities. They committed themselves to excellence while others were distracted by popularity. Excellence has a remarkable quality. It attracts attention without asking for it. Think about the people you admire most. Do they spend every day proving their worth, or do they simply live in a way that naturally earns respect? Real value is quiet. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself through consistency, a person who keeps promises, a person who remains disciplined when motivation disappears, a person who protects their integrity even when no one is watching, a person whose confidence is built upon action rather than words. These qualities cannot be manufactured overnight. They are built one decision at a time, one early morning, one difficult workout, one book finished instead of one more hour spent worrying about someone else's opinion, one uncomfortable conversation, one promise kept to yourself. Every small act of self-respect becomes another brick in the foundation of unshakable confidence. People often believe confidence arrives after success. The truth is almost the opposite. Confidence is built by repeatedly keeping commitments to yourself long before anyone notices. When you tell yourself you will wake up early, and you do. When you promise yourself you will exercise, and you follow through. When you decide to learn a new skill, and you remain consistent after the excitement fades, these moments create evidence that you can trust yourself. And self-trust is the birthplace of authentic confidence. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The person who once waited desperately for messages no longer checks their phone every few minutes. The person who once feared being alone begins enjoying solitude. The person who once measured life through someone else's attention begins measuring it through personal growth. This transformation is subtle. No dramatic announcement, no public declaration, just a gradual shift in priorities. The people who once ignored you may eventually notice. Not because you tried harder to impress them, but because you stopped trying altogether. There is an undeniable psychological truth. Absence reveals value more clearly than constant presence. When someone has unlimited access to you, they often overlook your significance. But when your energy becomes directed toward meaningful pursuits instead of constant availability, people begin noticing the space you once occupied. This does not happen because you are manipulating them. It happens because you have genuinely become different. You no longer interrupt your goals to earn temporary validation. You no longer abandon your standards to avoid loneliness. You no longer confuse attention with respect. And perhaps the greatest irony of all is this. By the time some people finally recognize your worth, you may no longer need their recognition, because your identity is no longer built upon external approval. It is built upon internal achievement. This is why purpose is the greatest antidote to rejection. A person with a mission cannot afford to remain trapped in emotional distractions forever. Their future demands too much of them. Their goals require discipline. Their dreams demand sacrifice. Their potential leaves no room for endless pursuit of people who have already shown where their priorities lie. The most successful people are not necessarily the most talented. They are often the ones who learn to redirect emotional pain into productive action. Every disappointment became fuel. Every rejection became motivation. Every betrayal became a lesson in stronger boundaries. Every lonely season became an opportunity for deeper self-discovery. Instead of asking, "Why didn't they choose me?" they began asking, "Who am I becoming because of this experience?" That question changes your destiny, because life has a strange way of rewarding those who stop chasing what refuses to stay and start building what cannot be taken away. Your value was never meant to be determined by the people who overlooked you. It was always meant to be revealed through the person you choose to become when no one is watching, no one is applauding, and no one is promising that your effort will be recognized. In that quiet space where discipline replaces desperation and purpose replaces pursuit, you begin creating a life so rich with meaning that the approval you once begged for becomes insignificant compared to the respect you have finally earned from yourself.